The town was small, quiet, and far from the busy cities. People here lived simple lives, working in shops, on farms, and in small factories. Everyone knew each other by name, and every new face was noticed quickly. One cold evening, a woman arrived with a little girl. They carried only 2 small bags, and their clothes looked plain. The people of the town looked at them with curiosity, but no one asked too many questions. The woman called herself Alira, and her daughter's name was Lyra. She rented a small old house at the edge of the town, near the woods. The house was broken in many places, with a door that creaked and windows that let the wind inside. Still, Alira seemed happy to find a place away from the noise of the world. She walked carefully in the market, always speaking softly, never making eye contact for long. She never stayed in one place too long, as if she feared someone might notice her. Daniel, a single father who lived a few houses away, noticed her often. He was a carpenter, a man of simple skills, raising his own daughter, Anna, alone after his wife had passed away. He was used to helping people when they needed it, fixing things, carrying heavy bags, or sharing food when someone had less. He saw Alira struggling with her broken door one evening, and without asking much, he offered to repair it. She hesitated, her eyes showing fear, but finally she nodded. Daniel fixed the door with his tools, working in silence, while Lyra and Anna played outside. When he was done, Alira gave him a shy smile, one that looked as if she had not smiled in a very long time. Days passed, and Daniel continued to notice small things about Alira. She spoke carefully, as if every word had to be chosen. Her accent was strange, not from any country he had heard. Sometimes, when the sunlight touched her skin, there was a faint glow, but it disappeared so quickly he thought it was only his imagination. Lyra was different too. Her eyes seemed too bright, and she often looked at the night sky with longing. Still, she played with Anna like any child, laughing and running without worry. The town people whispered about Alira. Some said she was hiding from a bad husband. Others thought she had escaped from a faraway country. But no one knew the truth. Alira avoided questions, and whenever people tried to get close, she pulled away. Daniel, however, treated her like any other neighbor, not asking too much, not pushing, just showing kindness when needed. One night, as the wind blew strong and the power in the town went out, Daniel checked on his neighbors. He went to Alira's house to see if she was safe. Through the window, he saw something strange. Alira was holding Lyra close, and her hands glowed with a soft blue light. The child had a small cut on her arm, but as Alira touched it, the wound closed, leaving no scar. Daniel stepped back in shock, his heart racing. He knew what he saw was not possible, not human. The next day, he tried to act normal, but his mind kept returning to that moment. Who was she, really, and what was she hiding? Why would a woman with such strange power come to live in a forgotten town? He wanted to ask, but he also knew it was her secret. Still, his curiosity grew stronger with every passing day. Meanwhile, Alira felt the weight of her secret pressing down. She had lived in hiding for years, always moving, always running. She told herself she would not trust humans, that they would fear her, or worse, betray her. But Daniel's kindness troubled her. Why did this simple man not treat her with suspicion? Why did he smile at her daughter as if she was just another child? It was something she had not felt for a long time. Safety. That night, as Lyra slept, Alira stood near the window, watching the stars. Her glowing marks appeared faintly on her arms, swirling like silver tattoos. She whispered to herself in a language no human would understand. Her people were gone. Her enemies were still searching, and she had nowhere left to run. But here, in this quiet town, with this kind human father nearby, she felt something new. Hope. The chapter closed with Daniel walking home under the moonlight, his thoughts heavy with questions, but his heart strangely calm. He knew one thing. Alira was not like anyone else, and though he did not understand why, he felt that her secret, whatever it was, would one day change his life forever. Elira tried to live quietly, but Daniel's presence was becoming impossible to ignore. He was always around when something needed fixing, always offering help without asking for anything in return. The other neighbors were polite, but they kept their distance, whispering about her when they thought she could not hear. Only Daniel treated her like she belonged, and this confused her because in her world kindness was rare. One morning, heavy rain flooded the narrow road near Elira's house. Lyra slipped in the mud while running to school, and Daniel rushed forward to lift her up. His clothes were soaked, but he only laughed and carried the little girl to safety. Elira stood frozen at her door, watching the scene with wide eyes. She wanted to thank him, but words stuck in her throat. Daniel only nodded and walked away, as if such small acts meant nothing. To Elira, they meant everything. In the evenings, Daniel's daughter Anna began to visit Lyra often. The two children sat on the floor, drawing pictures, laughing, and exchanging secrets. Through them, Elira and Daniel found themselves sitting together sometimes. She spoke little, but he did not mind. He filled the silence with stories about the town, about his work as a carpenter, about small things that humans shared. Elira listened carefully, her heart strangely calm. She had heard voices of war, of fear, of betrayal for most of her life. But his voice was gentle, steady, and it made her feel safe. One evening, Daniel noticed Elira trying to lift a heavy box outside her house. Without waiting, he took it from her hands, setting it down inside. She looked at him sharply, as if she feared he had crossed a line. But then she saw the warm smile on his face, and her anger melted. "You don't need to help me," she whispered softly. "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but it doesn't mean I won't." For the first time, she laughed, a quiet sound that surprised even herself. Still, Elira carried her secret with heavy fear. She had sworn never to reveal who she was, not after what happened to her people. But one night, that secret nearly broke free. Lyra had a fever, her small body shaking under the blanket. Elira tried to stay calm, but panic filled her eyes. Daniel, hearing Anna's cries through the window, rushed inside without knocking. He found Lyra burning with heat, and Elira clutching her daughter's hand. Her palm glowed faint blue again, the same light Daniel had glimpsed before. This time, there was no denying it. The fever vanished as the glow faded, and Lyra breathed calmly once more. Daniel froze, his heart pounding. He had seen strange things in books, in movies, but never with his own eyes. Elira looked at him, her face pale with fear. For a moment, Daniel thought she might run, take Lyra, and disappear into the night. But instead, she whispered, "You should not have seen this." Her voice cracked, almost breaking. Daniel took a breath, steadying himself. "I don't understand what I saw," he said slowly, "but I won't tell anyone." Her eyes widened, searching for lies in his words. But she saw only truth. For Elira, this moment was heavier than any battle she had fought. No human had ever seen her secret and stayed by her side. Her own people had betrayed her, but this ordinary man promised silence without hesitation. Something deep inside her shifted. She wanted to trust him, though her mind screamed that it was dangerous. That night, while Lyra slept peacefully, Elira sat by the window. She thought about the stars, the empire she had lost, the throne that no longer mattered. And she thought about Daniel, who had no power, no armies, no wealth. Yet he stood stronger than anyone she had known, because he carried kindness in his heart. It frightened her, because kindness could break the wall she had built around herself. Daniel walked home in silence. The memory of that glowing light burned into his thoughts. He wanted to ask her questions, but he also knew she was afraid. So he chose patience. He told himself that when she was ready, she would speak. For now, it was enough to know that he had seen her secret and still wanted to stay close. But outside the town, far beyond the woods, shadows moved in the night sky. Strange lights flickered among the stars. Hunters searching, watching, waiting, and though the humans of the town slept peacefully, Danger was drawing closer with every passing hour. Elira knew it. She could feel it in her bones. Her enemies were not far, and if they found her, no kindness in the world would be enough to stop them. The night was quiet, but Elira's heart was not. She paced inside her small house, her hands trembling, her thoughts restless. Daniel had seen too much. He had seen the light of her power. For years she had hidden it, covered it, buried it under silence. But now, a human man had witnessed what she truly was. She knew she could run again, disappear into another forgotten town. But something inside her refused. Something whispered that running would no longer save her or her child. The next morning, Daniel came with bread and milk, pretending nothing had happened. His eyes were calm, his smile gentle, but Elira felt the storm inside her. She closed the door behind him, her voice low. "You should not be here." Daniel stood still, waiting, his patience sharper than any weapon. Finally, she whispered the words she had sworn never to say. "I am not from your world." The silence after those words felt heavy, like a wall closing around them. Daniel did not laugh. He did not doubt. Instead, he said softly, "I know." Elira's breath caught in her throat because she expected fear, anger, or betrayal. But all she saw was his steady gaze. She sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking. "My people are gone," she whispered, "my home destroyed." Her voice cracked as memories of fire, screams, and broken cities filled her mind. "They came for me because I am the last of my line, the last princess of a kingdom that no longer exists." Daniel listened without interrupting, his hands resting on the table. He was a carpenter, a father, a simple man. Yet in that moment, he looked stronger than the warriors she had once commanded. Elira told him how she had fled through the stars, carrying her daughter, hiding from hunters who wanted her crown and her blood. She told him of the marks on her skin, the glowing patterns that bound her to her people's lost legacy. Every word she spoke was a blade cutting through her silence. And when she finished, her eyes filled with tears, expecting him to walk away. But Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm. "You are safe here." The words struck her harder than any weapon. Safe, she thought. How could she be safe when the stars themselves burned with her enemy's eyes? And yet, he believed it, and part of her wanted to believe it too. For Daniel, the truth was heavy, but he carried it like he carried wood on his shoulders. He looked at Elira and saw not an alien princess, not a fugitive from the stars. He saw a mother protecting her child. He saw fear, pain, and loneliness hidden behind her silence. And he knew, in that moment, that his life would never be the same. He was just a man, but he felt a duty, a calling, stronger than anything he had known. He would protect her, no matter the cost. That evening, as the children played, Elira sat across from Daniel. "You should not involve yourself in this," she warned, her voice sharp with fear. "You are only human. They will kill you if they know you help me." Daniel smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Maybe I'm only human, but that is enough," he said. She stared at him, searching for weakness, for hesitation, but found none. His words carried no armor, no weapons, only truth. And it shook her more than any enemy ever had. Outside, the night sky flickered unseen by most. High above Earth, a dark shape drifted among the stars. The hunters had arrived, their ships moving like shadows across the sky. They scanned, searching for her energy, for the glow of her blood. They were close, closer than Elira had feared. The air itself seemed heavier, as if danger was already breathing down her neck. Lyra, innocent and unaware, laughed with Anna. Her bright voice filled the room, breaking the tension for a moment. Elira looked at her daughter and then at Daniel. She realized that her fate was no longer only her own. It was tied to this place, to this man, to the kindness he carried like a shield. For the first time since her world had fallen, she was not alone. The night ended with Daniel walking home under the cold stars. He looked up, unaware of the shadows above, but feeling a strange pull in his chest. Elira watched him go from her window, the glowing marks on her skin faintly visible. She whispered to herself, "He will change everything." And though she still feared the hunters, still feared betrayal, a spark of hope burned quietly inside her heart. The town slept in silence, but above the clouds the night was alive with shadows. Dark ships moved like silent predators, their lights hidden, their scans reaching down to the quiet earth. The hunters had arrived, their machines searching for the last spark of royal blood. On the ground, no one knew, no one except Alira, whose heart pounded as she felt the air change. Her skin glowed faintly under her sleeves, reacting to the danger above. Daniel did not understand how she could sense it, but he believed her when she said, "They are here." The fear in her voice was enough to freeze his blood. He wanted to ask how far, how soon, but her eyes told him the truth already. They were too close. The hunters were not patient. They never were. They would search, they would burn, and they would kill until they found her. That night, strange things began to happen in the town. Dogs barked without reason. Machines in the factory shorted out, and lights flickered as if something drained the energy. People whispered about storms or bad weather, but Alira knew the signs. She had seen worlds fall under the same shadow. Her hands shook as she packed a small bag, her daughter's blanket folded inside. But when she turned to Daniel, he shook his head firmly. "Running again will not save you," he said. "We must face them." Alira wanted to scream at him, tell him that humans could not fight these hunters. But then she saw the look in his eyes. It was the same look he had when fixing a broken door, when carrying Lyra through the rain, when standing calm even after seeing her secret. He was not a soldier, not a warrior, but his courage burned brighter than any weapon. And for the first time, Alira felt that maybe she did not have to run. The hunters moved quickly, their scanners tracing energy lines. One of their ships landed deep in the forest, its legs crushing trees like paper. Strange creatures stepped out, armored and tall, their faces hidden behind black masks. They began moving toward the town, their voices sharp through machines. Alira felt their presence like knives cutting through her skin. She grabbed Lyra and whispered to Daniel, "We must hide." Daniel led them to an old underground shelter near the edge of town. It was a forgotten place built long ago during wars that humans barely remembered. Dust covered the walls, the smell of earth heavy in the air. Alira hesitated, but Lyra clutched her hand, and Daniel's steady grip pulled her inside. They closed the heavy door, the world above falling silent. But silence did not last long. The hunters began moving through the town, their boots echoing on the streets. They knocked on doors, their voices sharp, demanding answers. Humans woke in fear, confused by the sight of strange, armored figures. Some tried to resist, but the hunters pushed them aside, searching every corner. Alira covered her mouth to keep from breathing too loudly, holding Lyra close. She whispered in her daughter's ear, "Be still, be strong." Daniel looked at her, his fists clenched. He knew he could not fight them with strength, but he could fight them with time. If he could draw them away, if he could mislead them, maybe Alira and Lyra would survive. He leaned close and whispered, "Stay here." Alira's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "They will kill you," she whispered back, her voice breaking. Daniel only smiled faintly. "Maybe, but if I do nothing, they will find you anyway." Before she could stop him, he opened the shelter door and slipped into the night. His footsteps were swallowed by the sound of armored hunters moving closer. Alira's heart raced, her body trembling, torn between chasing him and protecting her daughter. She pressed her forehead against the cold wall, whispering in her own language, a prayer to stars that no longer answered. Daniel moved through the shadows of the town, his mind racing. He knocked over trash bins, broke old glass, and shouted from corners. The hunters turned their heads sharply, their scanners flashing. They followed the noise, believing it was the princess they sought. Daniel ran, his chest burning, his legs heavy, but he did not stop. He had no weapons, no armor, but he had something stronger, time. Every second he stole was another second Alira and Lyra remained hidden. Alira watched through the small, old camera system Daniel had repaired weeks ago. Her screen flickered with static, showing glimpses of him moving, distracting, standing before monsters that should have terrified him. Her hand shook as she realized he was doing this for her child. A human man, ordinary and fragile, defying hunters from stars. Tears filled her eyes, because she had never seen such strength in all her life. The hunters grew angry, their voices sharp, their weapons glowing. They realized the human was only a distraction, but it was too late. Daniel had already led them far from the shelter, deeper into the forest. Alira closed her eyes, her body trembling. For the first time, she felt powerless not because of her enemies, but because of the sacrifice of a man who had no reason to protect her. And in that moment, she knew that humanity was not weak, as her enemies believed. Humanity was dangerous in a way no empire could understand. Because where others fought for crowns and thrones, humans fought for each other. The forest was dark, the trees tall and silent, but Daniel's footsteps echoed with courage. He had led the hunters away from the town, but now they closed in, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Armored figures surrounded him, their weapons humming with deadly energy. One of them spoke through a harsh machine voice. "You are human, weak, useless, whereas she." Daniel stood tall, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face, but his voice steady. "I don't know who you're looking for." The hunters scanned him, their lights crawling across his body. They laughed, a cold metallic sound that chilled the air. "You lie." One hissed. "You shelter the last of the royal blood." Daniel clenched his fists, though he had no weapon, no power, only the will to protect. "If I did," he said, his eyes burning with defiance, "I'd never tell you." The hunters struck him across the chest, sending him crashing against a tree. Pain seared through him, but Daniel forced himself back to his feet. His ribs ached, his vision blurred, yet he stood again. To the hunters, it was madness. To Alira, watching through the flickering cameras, it was something else entirely, strength beyond reason. She pressed her hands against the screen, whispering his name, torn between fear and awe. The hunters grew impatient, their weapons sparking with deadly energy. They could kill him in an instant, yet something about his defiance unsettled them. Humans were supposed to cower, supposed to beg, but this man stood in the face of death and refused to break. "You will die for her," one of them sneered, raising a weapon. Daniel spat blood to the side, his voice raw but unshaken. "Then I'll die standing." In the shelter, Lyra clung to her mother's arm, whispering, "Mama, he's going to die." Alira's heart pounded, her fear rising. For years she had promised herself she would never reveal her power again, never risk drawing the hunters closer. But now, watching Daniel's body beaten, watching him bleed for her, that promise shattered. Her hands glowed bright, brighter than they had in years, the marks on her skin burning like silver fire. "No," she whispered, "not this time." Alira burst from the shelter, her glow lighting the night like a fallen star. The hunters froze, their scanners screaming with recognition. "The princess," one shouted, raising his weapon, but before they could fire, Alira lifted her hand, a surge of energy blasting through the forest. The ground shook, trees cracked, and the hunters were thrown backward like leaves in the wind. Daniel collapsed to his knees, gasping, as the storm of light swept around him. For a moment, he thought he had died and was standing in a dream. But then he saw her, Alira, standing tall, her eyes blazing with power, her skin glowing with the marks of her people. She was no longer the quiet stranger hiding in a small house. She was a princess, a force of fire and light. And for the first time, he saw her as she truly was. The hunters regrouped, their voices filled with rage. "You cannot win. Princess, you are only one." Alira stepped forward, her voice cold, her power burning. "I am not alone." She looked at Daniel, broken, bleeding yet still standing. His courage filled her with strength, and she realized the hunters were wrong. She was not one. She was two. She was more because this human had chosen to fight beside her. With another wave of her hand, Alira unleashed a storm of energy. The hunters' weapons shattered, their armor cracked, their voices turned to screams. The forest lit up with blinding light, shadows fleeing before her fury. Daniel shielded his eyes, but he did not run. He refused to leave her. When the glow faded, silence filled the air, broken only by the hiss of burning metal. The hunters were not all dead. Some crawled away, their bodies sparking with broken circuits. But they had been driven back for now. Alira fell to her knees, her energy drained, her body trembling. Daniel stumbled to her side, blood on his lips, pain in his chest, yet his hand reaching for hers. "You didn't have to," he whispered, his voice weak. "Yes, I did," she answered, her voice breaking, "because you did first." In that moment, something deeper bound them. Not just survival, not just secrecy, but trust forged in fire and sacrifice. Alira looked at him and saw more than a man. She saw the reason she had not given up, the reason she would no longer run. Daniel looked at her and saw more than a fugitive princess. He saw a leader, a protector, someone worth standing beside even. Against the impossible. But above the trees, hidden ships still watched. The hunters had been defeated, but not destroyed. They would return with greater numbers, stronger weapons, fiercer rage. The war for her fate had only just begun. And now, Daniel and Alira were no longer hiding. They were standing together, ready to fight whatever came next. The forest still smoked from the battle, broken trees and burning metal scattered across the ground. Alira knelt in the ashes, her body weak, her glow fading. Daniel stood beside her, one hand pressed against his ribs, blood still on his lips. They had survived, but the silence felt heavy, like the calm before a greater storm. Alira knew this was not the end. The hunters would not stop. They would return with more ships, more soldiers, more fire. Running would only delay the inevitable. For years she had told herself that hiding was survival, but now she saw the truth. Hiding was only dying slowly. Daniel's courage had awakened something she thought lost forever. The spirit of a leader, the fire of a princess who once stood before armies. Back in the shelter, Lyra clung to Anna, her small face pale with fear. When Alira entered, the child ran into her arms, trembling. Daniel watched quietly, his heart heavy yet proud. He saw Alira not just as a mother protecting her child, but as a woman carrying the weight of a broken world. Her eyes glowed faintly as she whispered, "No more running. It ends here." Daniel frowned, wiping the blood from his chin. "Alira, you can't fight them alone," he said, his voice steady. "I know," she replied, "and I won't." She turned to a hidden box she had carried across galaxies, a box she had sworn never to open again. With shaking hands, she unlocked it, the lid hissing as ancient technology awakened. Inside was a small device, glowing faint blue, humming like a heartbeat. Daniel stared, amazed. "What is it?" "A beacon," Alira whispered, "to call what remains of my people, if any still live." Her fingers hovered over the beacon, fear in her eyes. For years she had stayed silent, afraid that using it would expose her to her hunters. But now they had already found her, and Earth was in danger too. She pressed the device, and a pulse of light shot into the sky, invisible to human eyes, but loud across the stars. Somewhere, in the cold dark of space, allies or enemies would hear it. Daniel watched her with quiet awe. She was no longer the frightened stranger he had once met at a broken door. She was a princess reclaiming her strength. Yet what amazed him most was not the light, but the way she looked at him afterward. Her eyes carried trust, deep and unshakable. "You gave me back my courage," she whispered, "and now I will fight for this world as if it is my own." That night, they prepared together. Daniel repaired the shelter, turning it into a stronghold. Elira adjusted her remaining alien tools, crafting makeshift defenses with her glowing hands. The children watched silently, their young faces learning what courage looked like. Anna whispered to Lyra, "My father will protect us." Lyra answered softly, "So will my mother." And in their voices was the promise of two worlds standing as one. But above the earth, the hunters regrouped. Their ships moved into formation, their leaders snarling in fury. They had underestimated the human, underestimated the princess. Now they would strike harder with full force. The sky itself would soon burn. In the town, whispers spread. People spoke of strange soldiers in the night, of lights in the forest, of thunder without storms. Some wanted to flee, but Daniel stood before them in the marketplace, his body still bruised. "They are real," he told them, "and they are coming." Fear rippled through the crowd, but Daniel's voice did not shake. "They think we are weak, but we are not. We fight for our homes, our children, and that makes us stronger than they can ever understand." The townsfolk looked at him, a simple carpenter, battered and wounded, yet unbroken. His courage lit sparks in their hearts, sparks that Illyris saw and understood. This was humanity's true power, not weapons, not machines, but unity. A people who stood together could not be broken. That night, Elira and Daniel stood side by side on the hill overlooking the town. The stars above seemed too quiet, too watchful. Daniel's hand rested on the handle of a simple axe, the only weapon he had. Elira's hands glowed faintly, her power rising again. "We cannot win," she whispered, "not against their numbers." "Maybe not," Daniel said, his eyes fixed on the horizon, "but we will fight anyway." For the first time in years, Elira felt pride, not in her lost empire, but in the ground beneath her feet. This small human world had given her something no throne had ever offered: hope. And as the sky flickered with the first shadows of returning hunters, she knew the true battle was about to begin. The hunters believed they were chasing a runaway princess, but what they would face was far greater. They would face a human's defiance, a mother's fury, and the awakening of a bond stronger than any empire. The night sky split open with fire. Hunter ships descended in black waves, their engines screaming across the stars. The ground trembled, windows shattered, and the quiet town became the center of a war no human had asked for. People ran to shelters, children cried, but Daniel stood firm, an axe in his hand, his body bruised yet unshaken. Beside him stood Elira, her glow brighter than ever, her eyes no longer hiding fear, but burning with fury. The hunters spread across the town, their weapons glowing with deadly light. They shouted demands in their metallic voices, "Give us the princess, or we will burn this world." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. "You will not touch her, and you will not touch this town." The hunters laughed, their towering forms mocking him. "What is one human against us?" they sneered. But Daniel did not stand alone. One by one, the townsfolk stepped beside him, carrying tools, sticks, and anything they could hold. Fear shook their hands, but courage held their feet. Elira raised her hand, the marks on her skin blazing like silver fire. "You think I am alone," she shouted, her voice echoing through the night. "But look around you, I am not." The hunters fired first, beams of burning light tearing through the air. Elira's power flared, shielding the humans, sparks raining down as energy clashed against energy. Daniel roared, charging forward, swinging his axe at the closest hunter. It struck the alien's armor, sparks flying, and though it did not break, the force of his courage shook even the machine. The battle spread through the streets. Houses burned, the earth cracked. Humans fought with everything they had, throwing stones, swinging tools, refusing to run. Elira unleashed storms of energy, her fury striking down hunters one by one. But their numbers were endless, and for every enemy that fell, two more appeared. Exhaustion filled her body, her glow flickering. She staggered, nearly falling, until Daniel's hand caught her arm, steadying her. "Not yet," he whispered, his voice raw. "We're not done yet." The hunters saw their chance. One of them broke through the shield and lunged for Lyra, who had hidden behind the ruins. The child screamed, her small hands raised, but no power came to protect her. Daniel's heart stopped, and without thinking, he ran. He threw himself between Lyra and the hunter's blade, taking the strike across his side. Pain tore through him, but he held firm, his body shielding the girl. Lyra's cries echoed, and Alira's scream shook the air. Something awakened inside her, stronger than anything she had ever felt. Her marks blazed like fire. Her voice rose like thunder. She unleashed a wave of light so powerful it blinded the sky. The hunters staggered, their weapons shattering, their armor cracking under her fury. They tried to retreat, but Alira would not let them. "You will not take her. You will not take anything from me again," she roared. Her power exploded, tearing through their ranks, until the last ship screamed into the sky, fleeing in flames. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of fire and the groans of the wounded. Daniel collapsed to the ground, blood soaking his shirt. Alira fell to her knees beside him, her hands glowing as she tried to heal him. "Stay with me," she begged, her voice shaking. "Please stay." Her light closed the wound slowly, but the pain remained. Daniel opened his eyes weakly, looking at her with a faint smile. "You changed me," he whispered, "and you changed yourself." Tears fell down her face as she pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "No, you saved me first." Around them, the townsfolk rose, victorious yet scarred. They had seen the impossible, they had fought the stars and survived. Alira stood, her daughter clinging to her side, her heart heavy yet full. She was no longer a runaway princess hiding in the shadows. She was something greater, a protector, a mother, and now, part of humanity. The beacon she had sent still pulsed across the stars. Somewhere, allies might be coming or enemies, but it no longer mattered, because she was not alone, not anymore. As dawn broke, the first light touched the ruined town. Daniel stood with difficulty, leaning on his axe, his body weak, but his spirit unbroken. Alira looked at him, her eyes soft, her voice quiet. "You changed my fate, Daniel." He shook his head slowly, smiling through the pain. "No, Alira, we changed each other." And so, in a small town on a quiet world, a story began that would echo across the stars. The hunters had come for a crown, but what they found instead was something greater. The strength of humanity, the courage of a father, and the fire of a princess who would never run again.